This is the DJI Mavic 3, the newest addition to the Mavic series, which has been DJI's most popular and successful line of consumer drones. This little drone right here can shoot 5.1K videos at up to 50 frames per second. It has two cameras with different fields of view, 360-degree obstacle avoidance, significantly improved flight time, and so much more. So starting at $2,000 and running all the way up to $49.99, is the Mavic 3 product line any good? Let's find out in this video. Beginning with the unboxing experience, we can see that it comes in a pretty big box. Inside, we get the drone itself, some backup propellers in case you try to do something stupid, a remote controller to which you will attach your phone as the main display, a charging brick with a non-removable Type-C cable for you to charge your drone or the remote controller, some extra cables for connecting the controller to different iOS and Android devices, and user manuals. Before taking a deep dive into the image quality and flying experience, I would like to show you some of the footage that we managed to capture with this little drone right here. Well, I guess my drone won't take off at all as long as I'm in Shanghai during the China International Import Expo. However, the camera still works fine, so I guess. Now, let's begin with the two different versions of the Mavic 3 product line. There's the normal Mavic 3, which is the one that we have here, as well as the Mavic 3 Cine. And there's rumored to be a third version called the Mavic 3 Classic coming this November. But that's not what we're focusing on today. The main difference between the normal Mavic 3 and the Cine version is the extra filmmaking features that come with the latter. You'll get 1 terabyte of SSD storage built into the Cine version, as well as the ability to shoot in Apple ProRes. While the normal version only has 8 gigabytes of normal internal storage, and can only shoot in H.264 or H.265 at 200 megabits per second. While 8 gigabytes is enough for you to grab some quick shots in case you forgot to bring your micro SD card, you'll still need an external card to capture more footage. And you can put a maximum 1 terabyte micro SD card inside. Another difference is the controller. The basic Mavic 3 comes with a normal controller that requires you to use your phone as the controller's display, which can be a little cumbersome if you have a relatively big phone. On the other hand, the Mavic 3 Cine comes with the RC Pro controller that has a built-in display, allowing you to fly even further since it has a better signal range. Other than those differences, the normal version and the Cine version are basically the same drone, so it just depends on whether you need those extra features. Moving on to the camera system of Mavic 3, this is where we see a drastic upgrade from the previous Mavic drones. While it still has the Hasselblad partnership icon, what's new is that we can see 2 different cameras this time. One normal wide-angle lens as well as a telephoto lens. So let's go through the camera specs first. Starting with the main camera, it has the 20-megapixel 4/3-inch CMOS sensor inside. That's right, 4/3-inch, not micro four thirds, meaning it should have better image quality and low light performance in comparison to 1-inch sensors. It has a 24mm focal length, which is the typical wide-angle focal length, allowing you to capture stunning scenery. Also, it has an adjustable aperture spanning from f2.8 all the way to f11, giving you more control in terms of exposure and depth of field. The main camera can shoot 5.1K videos for up to 50 frames per second, and it also supports DCI 4K. So for people who cannot live without DCI 4K, you're in luck. In addition, it can also record 4K videos at 120 frames per second, as well as 1080p videos at 200 frames per second. Moving to the second telephoto camera, it has a focal length of 161mm, meaning you have a 7 times optical zoom built into the drone. With this extra telephoto lens, you can view and record scenery from quite far away. You can also get some cool-looking shots without endangering your drone by flying too close to the action. Also, the compression you get with a telephoto lens is very unique in comparison to a wide-angle lens, giving you the chance to capture some special shots. However, while it also has a 20-megapixel sensor, it is quite limited in terms of functionality. As for the specs, it only has a half-inch CMOS sensor with a fixed aperture of f4.4, and it can only shoot in 4K at 50 frames per second at most, so no 5.1K for the telephoto lens. Also, it does not support D-Log or HLG, so if you want maximum flexibility in editing, then the lack of D-Log is quite a bummer since you can only shoot in normal color mode. On the other hand, the good news is that we still get to control the ISO and the shutter speed. Because back when the Mavic 3 was first announced, you couldn't even control the exposure settings on the telephoto camera. And you had to activate Explore mode to access the telephoto camera. Thankfully, those limitations have been solved through firmware updates. However, there's one thing that I don't like about the Mavic 3, and that is the ISO range. When shooting videos in normal color, your ISO range goes from 100 to 6400. But when shooting in D-Log, there are only two options available, 400 and 800. I know these two ISOs will probably produce the best image quality, but I don't think 800 is enough for low light shots, so that's something to consider. Now, let's talk about image quality. Since there's no way for me to fly this drone in Shanghai for the next 3 weeks, then I guess I'll just do some indoors testing. Beginning with the different resolutions. When we shoot at 50 frames per second, we can see both the 5.1K mode and the 4K mode are very close in terms of sharpness. If we zoom all the way in, then the 5.1K mode is a tiny bit sharper. However, there is a slight crop when shooting in 5.1K, which is another thing to keep in mind. As for the 1080p mode, its quality is just not that good. So if you want the best image quality, shoot in 5.1K. If you absolutely need 60 frames per second, then shoot in 4K. As for the dynamic range, it's sort of okay in normal color mode. If you want the best dynamic range possible, then you have to shoot in D-Log. The good news is that a Mavic 3 can capture videos in 10-bit color depth, so you don't have to worry about bending issues when color correcting your D-Log footage. Also, the Mavic 3 does support color display assist for you to see your exposure and colors more clearly when shooting in D-Log. So how about a flying experience? I would say it's extremely enjoyable, especially for people who have never flown a drone before. This is because DJI has simplified the whole flying process, along with extra precautionary functions to prevent new users from doing something stupid. The user really only has to focus on capturing beautiful scenery that cannot be seen from the ground. In the past, if you were flying a Phantom or the OG Mavic, then you know you'd have to push both control sticks inward to activate the propellers. Now you just tap the takeoff button and the drone will automatically take off and hover precisely in place. Also, while there weren't a lot of obstacle avoidance functions in the past, now we have omnidirectional obstacle avoidance built into the Mavic 3. So there is a lot of safe room to play with, especially for new drone pilots. However, keep in mind that there are 3 different flight modes that you can select on the controller, and obstacle avoidance is not available in sport mode, so be careful. Speaking of these different flight modes, this drone can be operated in Cine, Normal, or Sport. When you're in Cine mode, the drone will be less sensitive to your control inputs, meaning it would move slower in order to capture more cinematic videos. I highly recommend new users to fly in Cine mode. On the other hand, the Sport mode is for capturing high-speed actions or for getting to a specific destination as fast as possible. Like I mentioned before, as you can't use obstacle avoidance in this mode, it's really more for professionals or people who can drop 5 grand on a brand new drone. As for the normal mode, it's basically what you would expect. You can use the obstacle avoidance in this mode, so that's pretty much it. Next, how about flight time? Well, I'm happy to say that these drones have improved greatly in this area. The new Mavic 3 has a flight time of 46 minutes, while the previous Mavic 2 Pro is capable of just 31 minutes. While it's true that the actual flight time will be lower, as it depends on what you're doing with the drone, I'm still very happy to see the increase. Now I get to fly and capture more varying shots without worrying about the battery too much. I mean, knowing your drone has enough battery to fly home safely is quite reassuring. As for charging, you can buy the charging hub from DJI's official store if you have multiple batteries. If you're like me and only have one battery, you can charge it by plugging it into the Type-C charging port at the back of the drone. At the same time, the Type-C port also supports transferring files. I think this is quite useful because it's quite frustrating to take out a microSD card. Bad design, DJI. Overall, I think the Mavic 3 is one of the best drones on the market right now. I know the price tag is a little bit high, but considering the Mavic 3 is more for advanced hobbyists and professional filmmakers, I think the Mavic 3 is pretty worth it. On the other hand, if you're just getting into flying drones to capture some holiday videos, then the Mini 3 Pro would probably be a better choice. So what do you think of the Mavic 3? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, for tech and gadgets, we've got you covered. See you next time.